I want to welcome you to the Agentic Quality Show today. It's so nice to have you with us.
Hey, Tatiana, thanks for the invite. I'm super happy to be here talking to you today.
So Walter, you're a developer who started in quality as that, and now you work as a developer at Amazon, and you are speaker. You've been speaking at Innovate QA conference last year, and that was a successful talk. So tell us about how you got to the point where you are right now.
Sure. So yeah, before we go into that, quick kind of disclaimer that I'm supposed to do. Like everything I'm going to disclose here is my own personal opinions and experiences. Is that okay? Like I am
Yep,
not here representing Amazon
sounds
directly
good.
in any way. All right. So without out of the line, yeah, what you said is correct. I have 17 years to 18. It's going to be 18 now. Working on things related to quality in one way or another. I actually started as a QAE, and then I quickly decided to expand on that side and ended up moving towards the side of automation. I also experienced roles as a QAM, and then went back to QAE. I wanted to be more hands-on.
Uh-huh.
And then I discovered that developing tools that I needed to do my job was a good mixture between my passions,
Yeah,
right? And that I could also help others do their job faster and hopefully better in a more
yeah,
efficient
yeah,
way. So yeah, that's essentially why I
yeah.
moved into SDET.
I admire
Um,
developers who have quality background because, they produce the best code, and it's usually much easier to work with them as a tester, right? With my background, it's much easier to explain them what we're looking for and how to develop the great quality product. And so what is your role today, and what do you do?
yeah, so today I moved to SDE, and the reason there's a subtle difference I think between the SDET and the SDE role, and I still work. So today I work developing testing infrastructure and testing frameworks for Amazon Alexa, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, voice assistant today in the world. And as a developer, today at this scale, I'm mainly focused on building scalable products, right? The framework my team owns and what we do runs millions of test cases a month. And these are a mixture of test cases from multiple domains, and we work with many devices, both physically, virtually, in the cloud, simulators, emulators, all different, call them whatever we want. So today, what I do is I make sure that we can operate efficiently at that scale with a high availability and high reliability systems. That's why the change in the role. And even though I still work in quality products, it was time to take the next step and start designing these huge systems now.
Yeah, that's amazing. A million test cases. I can't imagine how do you even design the infrastructure and frameworks to do that. And of course, my next question would be, do you use AI for that, right? Like, how do you maintain and how do you scale these many test cases?
We do use AI in certain points. So that's a very broad question. In which particular area of the whole flow would you like us to focus on? To develop
So
the frameworks, we
tell
do, yes.
us, tell us where does AI show up in your work? Do you use it for coding, for test creation, for debugging, for design reviews? Like, where do you, which stages of the SDLC do you use AI for?
It's a great question. I think I use it everywhere, with different degrees of confidence and trust, and we can discuss about that later if you want. But it has basically infiltrated the whole process now. Is there anyone in particular? Is there any point where you would like us to start, and maybe we can zoom into each one of these ones that you noticed?
So I'm
Or
curious from the developer perspective, right? So let's talk about developer
sure,
and the quality
sure,
perspective. So
sure.
from the developer perspective, unit test is the obvious place to use AI for. Do you do that or not? And
I
and uh, and the code reviews. Let's talk about that next.
Okay. I particularly don't use them for unit tests. I take a
Okay.
different approach there. I use them, I think, once I have defined the shape of my unit tests and what I'm testing. But let me give you a little bit of background before that. Before AI or before Gen AI, I was a big practitioner and proposer of test-driven development. In test-driven development, usually you would write the test cases first, you would see them fail, and then you would make the minimal amount of code that make those test cases pass, and then you would refactor, and then you keep iterating, right? That's kind of how it goes. And I believe that really good designs emerge from that, usually very maintainable and very robust. And of course, coverage doesn't mean that your system works as expected and that it serves the business needs, but it gives you an idea, right? There's a particular flavor of TDD, which is called ping pong TDD, in which it comes from the XP time, from extreme programming practices, where you would write a test and someone else sitting by your side would make that test case pass. And then that person would write the next test case for you. And then you need to make it pass, right? That's hence the term ping pong, right? And it's a pretty interesting way of working. It's pretty fun. And I really loved working that way. So today I use AI in a similar way, kind of as a someone that I'm using for pair programming. And most of the time I design and write the test cases, right? Of course, there's auto-completion and there's some ideas where I use AI when writing the test cases as well, right? But I tend to start with what we call the degenerate cases. So what happens when on the edge cases, right? Empty arrays coming or nulls coming into your functions or invalid values. And I tend to cover all that and I ask the AI, hey, go and make these test cases pass, right? And then once that's done, I start working on the business cases and the inner sites, right? And then I ask the test cases, the AI to make all this work. And then I make it to refactor. And because those test cases were written or at least designed by me, I get a pretty good idea on what the public APIs of my new code look like, right? And what principles are in there, how scalable it is, and how testable it is. If you write the test case first, there's no way your code is not testable, right? Like you are kind of embedding this in.
So you're basically writing the requirements first. Like this is what the code should be doing by defining what the negative scenarios are, what the edge scenarios are. These are all of the requirements for the code. And then if you have that, then AI can write the code that does that.
Yes, potentially. It's similar. That is the thinking process. I think you are bringing a super interesting question or point. It would be super good to write them in form of requirements. And there are tools out there that do it where to define the requirements and then it's writing both the test and the test cases. I think that I'm at kind of a little bit of an inner layer on that. But in a way, I'm writing the requirements, yes, by writing these tests.
That's how I see the job of the developer is transforming, and this is the role of testers. Was until AI came in, we would analyze the requirements that come from PM, and then we would find the gaps, and then we would update or file defects for the gaps in the requirements. So now it seems like you are doing that work as a developer and you use AI as your partner. I think that's amazing, like to use AI as your assistant to do that.
That's essentially what's going on. That's not what most people I see doing, like people, and you will hear a lot in talks and presentations, like people saying, now the whole problematic part of writing your unit test, which nobody likes to do, is being done by the AI, right? But I maybe it's my testing background. I kind of the V model, right? The usual V model where for each like every activity on the left side essentially has a counterpart on the right side. The V model for our listeners is a way to understand testing activities and how they relate to the activities in the software development lifecycle. So in a similar way, I do that, and one of the reasons I do that as well is that I think that AI. So if you are using the AI to write the code, and then you're using AI to test the code, AI tends to be too kind with itself, right? It will just write the code the test that will make the current code pass, right? But it's not going to check for the edge cases and the degenerate cases, like what happens when bad things happen, the exceptions are thrown, and even if you prompt it, it doesn't tend to do too much of a good job with that, and that's why I like. Plus, I like coding, right? So I kind of feel if I just let AI do the whole coding process, I'm stripping myself from a lot of the pleasure I get from my work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I know that there is a fear in a developer community that their profession is partially going away because AI now can do a lot of that without them, right? And now you're just orchestrating the AI rather than doing it yourself. So I know
Yeah.
I've heard that. Have you heard that kind of
I,
thoughts?
I've heard it. Yeah, I have mixed emotions on it depending on the day. I think in a way, natural language has added an extra abstraction layer on top of it. So it's a good thing in the long run. Like I think we still have some way to go as developers. Afterwards, who knows, right? Things are changing so fast. I feel that if you're out, if you are not staying up to date in a month, you're already out of
Yeah.
the latest thing that is happening.
Yeah.
But I think we have a long way to go. There are problems coming with that. We can talk about it if you want for a bit. But it's the fear is there. Uh,
So yeah, so back to unit test writing. So you basically said that don't use AI for white box testing, right? Don't show your code to AI. You treat it as a black box testing. Maybe give a requirement or spec or UI or API to AI, and then ask it to break it down and figure out how to test it and find the gaps, rather than show it both the code and the spec. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of you're. I think you're making a reference of a previous conversation we had in terms of like that's why you are bringing the white box testing. So yeah, so for the audience, essentially when you test, there's you can approach testing. I mean, in the taxonomy of test and test design, there's three broad ways to categorize it. One of them is like you can do what is called white testing or black box testing. White box testing, black box testing. Speaking about how much you can see in white box testing, we get to see the code and the implementation details and the technicalities. So we are kind of cheating in a way, right? Because we can know what can work and what cannot work. In black box testing, we stay away from that. There's also something called gray box testing where we are in the middle, right? We kind of see part of it, not fully. And this has been proved by papers. There's a bunch of papers on these. If the AI wrote the code, it by definition kind of believes is their correct code for whatever problem you defined, right? So when it writes the test, it's going to go and make it pass. I think what you're bringing is correct. Like if you really want to make sure it writes, I'm not going to say good test, but at least better test or with a better chance, you probably should try to go back to that original definition of the problem space, whatever that looks like. And depending on where you're working, that could be API if you're working, at system level, but it could also be the requirements. And it really depends on what you are trying to do. From the unit test perspective, public APIs would work. But then if you are working on a test strategy or the actual test case definition for a system, it can save you some time, and it probably shouldn't know how it is implemented. It shouldn't care, right? Like at the end of the day, if you want to purchase something in an e-commerce, do you care what technology they're using, which database, and how it's implemented? You probably don't, right? You want to make sure you go, you see the product, you add the product to your cart, and then it's sent back to your home when you pay. So yeah, I think both are useful. Like everything, it's more tools in the toolbox. But if I had to choose, I would rather define my test cases without looking into the implementation.
Awesome. And talking about the tools, do you use any tools, external tools, internal tools? I know Amazon and big tech companies, they usually build their own internal tools.
Yeah,
So do you guys build the tools for using AI for testing your
yeah.
products?
So of course, I mean there are no tools for the products I'm testing, right? So we need to build them. Like I work, as I said, in Alexa, the voice assistants, which is even if it's now a more general technology, there's easier ways to do it. Before when we started, there was nothing. Like I started working on that team 8 years ago, so we built multiple tools. They're using what I call kind of grandpa AI. Even there was like this kind of thing was already in place in back in the day. And today we do use an array of internal tools. Most of them are actually public now, so things like Amazon, AWS Bedrock, right? We rely on that a lot. And there's some IDEs and some frameworks that Amazon is releasing. We use those. I also use outside Amazon for kind of my personal research and work, other tools and other models. and yeah, there's an array of different things that I'm using.
I wanted to ask you about, so you talked about some of the biases that AI can bring into the picture while testing its own code. But have you seen times when AI found something that humans didn't? There's a lot of talk about like how humans understand business logic and they understand more. The AI doesn't understand that. But have you seen the cases where AI found something that humans didn't?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that, and it's a very interesting point, right? Because I think what the thing with AI is the scale at which it operates and the amount of time it can be running, right? So you don't need it to be better than a human tester. You just need to be partially similar, even at the same quality, or a little bit less, because afterwards you can have an array of agents and AI tools running on the back for hours, right? But it's a good point. I still think here's a caveat. You've heard about the 7 testing principles, kind of standard
Yep.
ISTQB material, right? One of them. So one of the principles is, so there's a couple of them, but one is, testing doesn't prove the absence of defects,
Yep.
right? So I don't think that has changed, right? So you are never going to find everything, or you cannot guarantee that there are no more bugs, right? So AI finds bugs, but humans also find bugs that AI doesn't. At the end of the day, it's us building the tools and us writing the prompt for now. That might change. So and yeah, so I think the answer is yes. I've seen that. It's interesting.
And have you seen cases where AI did fail you, where you thought you could rely on it, and it
Yeah, yeah, it can happen, right? I think there's an amount of expertise that the users using AI also need to have, and I see a lot of people using AI. So it's not only me. So I'm going to talk about the generic use cases kind of here and seen. And if you give it a bad prompt, it's going to go and do bad things, right? Like some prompts tend to generate, or you can see prompts and models that tend to hallucinate a lot more, and they can send you down the rabbit hole of issues that are not really there. Or you might, it's interesting what happens, especially at scale. You might end up finding too much, right? And then you don't even know how to prioritize, and you kind of go into this paralysis mode of like, hey, my tool found 1 million bugs. Are they really bugs? And even if they are, how are you going to fix this, right? So there's kind of a balance to strike in there
yeah.
in the usage, and
And
I think we are learning.
and how do you create a good prompt? Like, how do you learn that skill? Do you have any
Yeah,
advice?
good, good point. So first, I think you need to practice, like everything in life. So you need to use the tools, use the models. You also need to understand that usually a product is not a prompt. In the same way, a product is not a model. A product has to be more than a prompt. Like you still need to think product on what you are building, right? Say that you are building a tool that can identify, I don't know, bugs in a UI, right? And it needs to from a screenshot. So let's say that identifies that, right? So your product is still a product that identifies bugs based on a screenshot. It's not the prompt that it's running. There has to be, there's a pipeline, there's more things. And one quick, very objective trick I can give to the listeners is start with a good data set. And that is probably the most expensive part. Like, and when I say data set, it's essentially a collection of data points that you can understand if are correct or not for your use case. So let's use this UI tester or analyzer, right? So you start with, I don't know, 100. It's probably too small, but you start with 100 screenshots that are successful, and you use these to test your system. We're not talking training a model here. That's a completely different beast. But you start with 100 that you know are correct, and you start with 100 that are incorrect, and then you run them through your system. And is your system catching those, yes or not? And is it doing it consistently? And then you kind of go from there. If you cannot arrive to stability in a small data set that where you know the results, you're going to be in a very tough situation, right? And it doesn't really matter your prompt. That confidence is not going to be there. Am I answering your
Yeah,
question?
so now you're saying that if someone does develop their tool that validates the UI, right? Like this is how you test the tool, basically, right?
Correct, because the problem hasn't changed, right? It's exactly like in the old days. I can develop my product, but how do I know that it's working? In that sense, it doesn't matter if it's a prompt or if it's a standard algorithm or what am I using. And I don't think that is going to change for a while, right? You still need that kind of baseline to make sure that is working as expected, right? The technology is a detail.
Yeah. And that's where the human thinking comes into play, right? So what still requires the strong human intuition or intervention with all of these AI capabilities?
Yeah, I think we still need to challenge a lot of the outputs that it comes with. So we need to work a lot towards this concept of, how much can we verify the output of the systems that are powered with LLMs? I'm not saying that's going to be like that forever. We might end up there's already papers showing how bigger and smaller models interact between themselves in order to control each other, both in kind of responsible AI space and outside responsible AI space. So I'm not saying that's going to stay there forever, but for now, the design of these experiments, even if you use AI to assist you, which I think we are all doing, or at least I'm doing a lot, kind of as a prove me wrong partner, but we need to design these things and we need to challenge it, right? The question is, how do you prove where it fails? Because it does fail, right? Due to its nature, there are holes, and then how do you understand and who makes the call and how do you make the call to tolerate the risk? Say that you build a tool and say that it's only 90% accurate. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Right. And
so human in the loop is still important, right?
Yes,
I did hear some claims that, we have an autonomous AI tester, and I always question that because I don't quite think we're ready for that yet, right? Maybe in the future. So do you have any prediction?
We
Autonomous
might.
AI tester.
We might, right? And they might be there. But here's what it thinks. If I tell you I have a tester, so let's go to a human analogy, right? If I tell you, hey, we are safe, I have a tester. That doesn't mean anything unless, what does that mean? Your tester might be a good tester. It might be a bad tester. It might be super efficient, non-efficient, whatever. So the same is true with an autonomous tester, right? And then there's again this idea of volume. Right. What do you do with its output? Say that you have this autonomous tester and it's coming with 1 million bugs. And let's assume for a second those 1 million bugs an hour are real bugs. What do you do with those? There's a lot of questions. I think it's possible. And I think it's going to change a lot. The more we move towards agentic and autonomous AI, it's going to change. A metaphor that I think here works is, how self-driving cars, we still need to be paying attention, so kind of a human in the loop. And if you look at our streets, they're still prepared for the interaction for hybrid, right? There's street lights and things because some of the cars are not autonomous. I think that I have this theory, and I might be wrong, that if every single car was autonomous out there, right, you might not need street lights, right? I mean, you might still need pedestrian crossings. But because they will be able to orchestrate, or something somewhere will be able to orchestrate the traffic, and there will be less car accidents or whatever. I think a similar thing might happen with software development. Potentially, if we move to everything being autonomous, and I'm not saying we're ready, right? But as we head more in that direction, things might change. Because now your 1 million bugs might be taken by a system that can process the 1 million bugs and send 1 million agents to fix each one of these code issues. It's just very complex, right? It will take a while, and we might not be able to reach that point. But did I answer your question?
It doesn't, it doesn't sound too futuristic to me. It actually sounds visible, But on the other hand, we still have people who doubt AI and who don't want to start using it, and who still question the capabilities of the AI. So what would you say to people who are still, are not believers? What would you recommend them?
No, they're in their full right of not being believers, right? But it's a kind of a question on how much can you stay. I want to be cautious with the wording I use here. How are you going to compete, right? Because ultimately, even if you don't believe it's going to replace every single developer or do absolutely every single task, there's definitely benefits on being enhanced somehow by AI, even if you're just going to use it to prove. Like one of the favorite uses I have for it is to prove me wrong. I like to do my designs and come up with my own things, and then tell you, hey, tell me where this fails. Tell me what am I doing wrong, and I really want to stress it super hard, right? Like do a deep analysis, and I think that is putting me at an advantage because by the time I need to get a design reviewed, I already see some of the angles where people is going to be attacking with a good intention that design, right? And I think that puts me in an advantage, right?
Yeah.
So to them, it's like they are free not to use it and do it, but the question is for how long. And at some point, you're not going to be able to stop because they're coming so embedded in our systems, right? Like your IDs have these AI things, and your browsers are going to have it. And even if you don't want, when you're Googling your solution now to
Yeah.
whatever problem it is, you are getting an AI generated response. So
Yeah.
I
So
think
it's
it's a matter of,
here. There's
it
no
is here.
denying.
There's no denying. No, it's here. It's everywhere.
Another question I want to ask you is, what are the dangers of using AI? Like, have you seen examples where people misused it, and how to avoid that?
Yeah, I think I've seen examples. Um, I think the biggest risk is that we might lose our critical thinking skills, and to make it like an even bigger danger here might be that some engineers, like speaking directly in the terms of software development or testing, so I'm using engineer kind of in the anyone that works building a system, might never develop it, especially if they are new to the industry, right? They might not need it. Kind of like I don't know, like maybe it's something that is not won't be needed anymore at some point in the future, but today it still is. And I do see this over reliance on models. So quick example, right? Like, and I'm seeing this across multiple spaces and talking with the different people in different forums. You get to see this code that is problematic. You spend some time. So in the past, as a senior developer, I would look at the code that a more junior member of a team writes. Then I would come with suggestions, right? Like I would leave my comments. I will spend effort there making sure that I'm transmitting some of the things I believe to be correct, right? And today, and I would even jump into calls with them and walk them and pair program with some people, right? And share and have some fun and trying to communicate, have like proper human to human communication. Today, I sometimes wonder like what's happening when someone is using AI to write their code, and then you leave your comments, and then you see your comments exactly addressed, and it's like, is this person just passing my comments into the model on their side? And that might be okay. It might still be improving the quality of the code, but that learning, that knowledge transfer process might not exist there anymore. So that is a potential risk I see. And it's not only for developers. I've also seen technical documents where you at some point realize, hey, this is written by AI, like these requirements are written by AI. It's like, what does this even say? Like,
Yeah, that is true. Like that's where we need human in the loop, right? But I am very worried for people who graduate right now in a computer science degree, and they start working, and they with the help of the AI, they might not get some of those skills that we built, 20 years ago when we were
yeah.
working. And how can they get the same skills, or which skills would they need and which ones they won't in the current world?
It's a great question. Here are my honest and filtered thoughts. I think that a lot of people choose the career they based on what they really liked, right? And I don't think this applies to only software engineering or computer science. It's everywhere, right? If you are passionate about what you do, you'll find the ways, because you probably were not originally passionate about using AI. You were passionate about solving a problem with a computer or understanding how a computer works, right? Like going into those levels of depth. I think that people will potentially still develop the skills and it can be enhanced, like understand better how and why the different abstraction layers are built. And then the abstractions layers are not going away. Binary code is still going to be there, right? Machine language and all these things, and eventually the programming language for a while is going to be there. That might change. I'm not going to say that it's not going to change. It might. But for now, the network is the network. The protocols are the protocols. These things are there, and passionate people will still be passionate about it, irrespectively of using AI or not. They are just going to probably be able to solve problems faster, right? And understand deeper layers of it. But people that just chose a career because they were expecting, like a six figures salary, and are just there kind of to get the minimal amount of work done, get their paycheck and move, that I think that's a risky position to be on right now. Because eventually, AI is like this huge, massive continent of experts and PhDs that are now available to us. So how do you compete with that? Especially if you don't know the real problems, like the let me take a step back. I think so. I think software engineering is a social problem more than a technical one. Like some people is going to find this very controversial, and that's okay. But when you work at scale and building these as part of a team, there's like a lot of social aspects and a lot of social things that need to be there, right? And a lot of those interactions are based on your experience and real problems that you face. Like it's kind of this balance. More senior members need to let junior members make mistakes so that they learn through them and kind of be there to support them when they fail and move. But all that pipeline might now be broken somehow. And you see these engineers kind of coming with like, hey, look at my design. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but do you even understand why that works and why are those the valid options?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what are the trade-offs? So yeah, I think that makes a difference,
yeah.
and more than ever, the gap will widen.
And yeah, and you pointed out the social interactions in the workplace. I think that is something that might not get replaced by AI for a while, right? Like if we're talking about a 2,000 people organization and there are multiple teams with multiple leaderships, which they have their own culture, their own visions, and they have to work together to produce one product, let's say, right? Or one experience that has to flow for a customer. I think that's going to be hard to emulate with the AI agents because there's too many thought processes are going into this.
Yeah, you bring a very interesting point. I agree, but you know what? You just trigger a thought on myself, which is like even before AI, we kind of tried to replace it when the pandemic came. We started working remotely, and that had an explanation. But then after pandemic was gone, a lot of people was kind of pointing like that they were more productive
Yeah.
while being working remotely or better work-life balance and whatnot. So you kind of just trigger this thought of like, hey,
Yeah,
we
no,
used to
this is
replace
an
that even
interesting
before AI.
topic. That's an interesting topic because I'm hearing people, hey, I'm more productive when I work remotely, but I'm also hearing, hey, I learned so much working in person from all of my, peers and people who are more senior than me that I could not have learned working remotely, right? So both sides of this coin, that I don't think there's a clear yes or no answer on this, right?
I agree. Let me tell you something though. Like we before in different times you were asking me about stories and things. So the 8 years ago when I joined Amazon, I remember I was reading a great book by Martin Fowler called Domain Specific Languages. And I was like really eager to implement something related to that. I didn't care what, right? It's like when when you have a solution and you're looking at a problem for it. So I was kind of in that position. And I remember that I joined the team and my team had some test cases to test Alexa. And they were more or less okay, but I was like, there has to be a way to fix this with the DSL. I remember telling my manager back in the day, hey, give us 2 days to do a hackathon, right? And in that hackathon, we explored something called mob programming, which is like pair programming but at scale, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, I've heard
like a
about
bunch
that.
of
Yep.
people. Yeah, it's a super cool experience, and I really wanted to do mob programming. It's like we are going to see it, and 5 of us are going to be working on the same product, and only one of us is going to be coding, but it's going to be great and amazing. And of course, there was some challenges and pushbacks, but eventually I convinced my manager, and we did it, and we wrote in 2 days the core technology that evolved into the framework that we're using today. So that initial release that we did in 2 days lasted for probably running in production from 2018 to 2021. So for 3 years, the core of that code that we produced in 2 days was not changed. We expanded it. So we built like a really strong kernel-like thing, and then more people was adding on top of that. But we did it in 2 days. And the language that we built a language to define how do you test a voice agent. Like it's over JSON, but it's still a language, still a new way to declare intentions. We built it in those 2 days, and it's essentially running up to today. We're on version 2, and some things were added and some things changed. But it's still there. So we built it 8 years ago in 2 days, and it's still running. And I think that part of it is because we were working together. Like there was a mob of people
that's the
thinking.
power of the team, and working closely together.
True. And there were, back in those days, it was a great team. We had, I think, 11 different nationalities in that team because we were an international team, 11 or maybe a little bit more. But it was a very diverse team with very, very strongly opinionated people from different backgrounds. But we built a great product in 2 days.
Power of diverse teams. I love being part of the diverse teams because I feel like people are trying to solve the problem together, and that's their focus when you're in a diverse team, rather than finding the commonalities when, you're in the team which are more homogeneous.
Yeah,
So diverse teams are definitely a winner for me.
For problem solving, it is. It just brings so many different perspectives on things you haven't, the unknown unknowns, right? So those get solutions.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great chat, Walter, and I want to ask you any last words for our audience. Any advice on AI or not to AI, or any last words you want to leave us with?
No, I think, nothing that I wouldn't be saying any revolutionary. AI is here. We need to use it. My top advice is explore it as much as you can. I feel nobody really knows what they're doing with it, right? Like you don't probably need to be a scientist to be running your own experiments or to be making inventions and innovation with it. Like we are all discovering this together. So educate yourself, just because if you're starting from zero, it's too hard, right? So, we are standing in the shoulders of giants and whatnot. So go and see what's out there, what things are people using. But it's early days. It's very, very early days. So we still need to figure out what to do with it and how to use it properly. So go and explore, have fun. That is probably the most important thing, right? Show your use cases to people and have fun.
I love that. And where can people follow your work? Do you have any blog? I know you're going to be speaking at Star East. Is that right? In May?
Yeah, in order, I don't have a blog. I should. I know. I've been with this idea of writing a book for a while now, related to the 6 different aspects of building a testing framework. So that idea keeps evolving, but I still not. I'm on LinkedIn, although I'm not very active. But people can reach out with questions and comments and thoughts, and I'll be happy to answer that. There's a couple of conferences that I'm already lining up for 2026. So there's one called Testing Mind Seattle in March.
Oh, yeah.
I still need to do my Innovate QA application, but I think I have a really cool idea. I expect to be there. And awesome. Then, I interestingly enough, I did not get the confirmation for Star East yet, but I'm on the page
You're
as
on
a
the
speaker.
page.
So if I'm in the page as a speaker, I'm going to assume that I'm speaking, and I'm also on the schedule. So Star East
Awesome.
is also something that is coming down the line. So I expect to be pretty active this year.
Awesome.
It's
Well,
really
thank you
exciting.
so much for sharing your thoughts. I found that very insightful, and hopefully our audience will too. And looking forward to your next speaking engagements.
Awesome. Yeah. Great talking to you, Tatiana. Thanks a lot for inviting me. And yeah, let's stay connected.